This evening, we've got Claire Austin of Claire Austin Hardy Perennials. And Claire's just come back from Thailand to get away from the horrible English winter. So, welcome, Claire. Now, did you see anything of particular garden interest in Thailand?
Yeah, we stayed at a rather large hotel, modern one, which I wouldn't have chosen. But the garden in the centre of the U-shaped buildings was absolutely extraordinary. They'd left a lot of the native trees and the tamarisks and so on, and they'd underplanted. They'd put in this beautiful hanging basket chair, egg-shaped one, and underplanted it with grass, but it looked like a sort of steeper grass, but it wouldn't be because it's tropics, and then edged it all around with these wonderful ferns, and it was a really cool glade appearance. And from a tropical point of view, it was amazing. I was absolutely stunned by it. It's not my sort of thing, wouldn't do that in my garden, but in that it was just amazing.
Yeah, I think hotel gardens can be in Southeast Asia and India can be
Yeah.
really some of the best places to see
Oh, absolutely.
the most innovative planting.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could never say that about anywhere in Europe or America, hotel gardens planting, but in environments, I suppose, where people are sort of outside more. And it just seems to be that you get real cutting edge innovation in terms of planting
Well,
design.
interesting. This chain was a part of an American chain,
All
so
right.
I don't know whether they replicate it in their other spaces. But whoever done it, and I really did want to ask them who's
Yeah.
designed this because it was amazing.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
wasn't one of the Four Seasons resorts, was
No, it
it?
was at Miners Hotel, which are quite upmarket hotels, but it was lovely, lovely.
Market, she says, sort of. Yes,
Didn't pay that amount. It's Thailand.
yes. Yeah, we must interview Bill Bensley one day. I've been promising this for a long time. Does gardens for the Four Seasons resorts, and he what his team do. They're based in Bangkok is really quite amazing.
Yeah, the Four Seasons.
Anyway, I think we must pull ourselves back to the dreary island. Welcome back, anyway. So now, and we always start these discussions. How did you get into plants and gardening?
How did I get into it? Right, so I've been involved in horticulture since, well, coming on for nearly 50 years, really. I started with my father when I was in my late 20s, and he had David Austin roses. So, but at the time his roses weren't well known at all, and he was sort of thinking of diversifying. So he chose to diversify at the time into what he called florist flowers, which was irises and peonies, but started to collect up perennials as well. And he did his first Chelsea Flower Show in 1982, and the press just took to them. So that basically they took off. He'd introduced Graham Thomas and Mary Rose, which were the first roses. And the next year he said, well, I'm going to plough these all in, these plants. I don't want them. And he collected them from most amazing breeders like Clem's peonies in the States and irises from all over the place. I'm like, no, I'll look after them. I started I knew nothing. I'd been to art college, knew nothing about plants, but amazing what you learn by taking photographs, writing notes, and just living the plants, and gradually just became a magpie. So that's how I got into it.
Okay, so you basically took over the perennial collection.
Yes, he'd collected about 2 years, and then I just thought, no, I shall. It seems such a waste to.
Yes, well, yes, yeah. Were you never tempted to follow him in the rose direction?
No, I didn't want anyone to follow anyone to the roses. No, my brother did. He was already. Brother had already started with him and then left briefly. So I came back, and my brother's taken the business on. So.
Right.
Well.
So you had the business was in Shropshire for a while, wasn't it? Kind of north of Shrewsbury.
Well, I then met my husband Rick, of all things, on a hotel on an airport bus in Florida. In year 2000, as you do, and we thought, well, we'll move from where we were in Albrighton. The problem was I was growing my perennial, all my plants amongst the roses, and every time they moved the roses, they were, no, you've got to dig them up again. So I thought, that's it, no, we're moving. So we moved to a rather downbeat garden centre. No, first we moved about 7 miles down the road. We couldn't grow any bigger, so then we moved to a downbeat garden centre up in North Shropshire. And then our final move was about 15 years ago to here, where we are on the Welsh Marches, which is the borders of Shropshire and Montgomeryshire. It's quite high up. There's a hell of a lot of rainfall on it. But it was where my parents had moved to for their weekends, and
Oh,
my mother died. My father didn't want the place, so we said, "Oh, we'll move up here." Best thing
all right.
we did.
Okay.
That's why we were.
Yeah, it is a really lovely bit of the country, isn't it?
Yes, you have visited us, haven't you? Yeah. Yes, it's
Indeed.
beautiful.
Yes. So you sell hardy perennials, but and you have a sort of these specialist ranges of peonies and irises. Although I think you were telling me the other day they don't actually account for that much of the business.
No, and even though the problem with peonies and irises is that the irises we only dispatch between end of August to mid October, although we take orders all year round. So that can only be a small part of the business. And to be honest, in Britain we have so many plants we can grow. You've got to fit something in. So that's the irises and the peonies. Though you can sell them in pots, we have over 200 varieties, and we just think, nah. So we do them just mainly bare root. So they're from October till, well, usually till about now, but it's going to be, because it's been a cold winter, it's into March. So 94% of our plants we sell, and we have something like, I can't remember how many varieties we sell, 1,600 different varieties of perennials.
Wow.
They get sold throughout the year in containers, bare root as well. Yeah, that's what we
So
sell.
how important is it, do you think, to have a couple of specialist ranges? I mean, you know you have the irises, bearded irises mostly, aren't they, and peonies, perennials. I mean, are they
Yeah.
like is it like a flagship thing?
Well, no, I don't do it because of that. Although obviously we've got the collection. It's just something I absolutely love them. I mean, I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I potter around and cross pollinate irises, and got
Yes,
quite
yes.
a lot growing on. Some it's just
Mm,
trying to find something that is actually innovative.
yes.
And I thoroughly admire the iris breeders in Oregon. We go and see them quite a lot.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They're the best breeders in the world, and
Oh,
because
really?
of
Now
the
that's
climate.
interesting.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
So who are they and where are
Well, you've
they?
got, I think the premier one at the moment is probably Thomas Johnson from Mid America.
Yeah,
He's an
yeah.
amazing breeder. And Paul Black does smaller, and he just breaks the boundaries. So the two of those two are very good. Keith Keppel, who's been breeding for over 50 years.
Yeah.
He's now, I think he's well in his 80s. He still breeds irises and so on. And then down in Australia, and this is part of the little triangle of amazing iris breeders, there's Barry Blythe, who's similar age to Keith. And what they would do was, because your cross-pollination season, flowering seasons are different in Australia and America, they just go and visit each other. So in the winter, Keith
Yeah.
would go down to Australia, and in the summer, in Australia's winter, they go to Oregon. So
Right.
a lot of the
Okay.
irises, yeah, it's amazing actually.
Yeah,
That's the history of irises. It's that these
yes. A
things
lot
have
of
been
traveling
developed
about.
through
Yes. Starting off.
sharing.
Yes.
Yes,
Starting off with Crusader saddlebags.
yes, that's right. Yes. So and iris breeders are very generous people. They really,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
peony breeders are a little less so, but it takes so long to create a peony. I mean, it's just
Right. Yeah.
so long. And I do love what's come out with the intersectional peonies, which are cross
Yeah.
tree
Mm.
and herbaceous. But they've got to a sort of stalemate now. I think they've gone as far at the moment. So
Oh,
somebody
really?
breaks the boundaries.
Yeah.
So
So with
it,
irises, how many years from seed to knowing what the flowers are going to look like with a bearded
with an
iris?
iris,
Yes.
we here have quite a short season. For us, for me, it takes about 2 years, 3
Right.
years.
Yeah.
But in the state, in Oregon and so on, it can actually be the next year because
Wow.
just that
Yeah.
little bit longer.
Yes.
But
Yes.
then that's to
Right.
know what the flower's like. Yeah.
So in terms of sort of iris breeding, what are the outcomes? I mean, the thing about iris is that the range of colours is probably wider and wilder than any other plants I know. And those
Oh,
incredible.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely. A lot, yeah.
so how what can you do? I mean, what are they doing? What are they coming out
Well,
with?
from what I'm trying to do is to actually bring something that will multiply in the damp soil we have. We are a heavy
Yeah,
clay. It's not ideal, but I'm sure I have got plants that are multiplying up beautifully. If I then sort of get somebody to grow them in a decent soil, they might actually do something. I found, sorry, I just love the form of the flower. So I'm looking for
mm,
something that has, and this is what iris breeders do look for, is you're looking for a good number of buds, a good number of, so that you get a good long flowering season. So you end up with having flowers that they can flower from early June, and then you get maybe 3 weeks of flowering, as opposed to the older ones that were raised probably in the 1940s, 50s, which are very short term.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, there is a fashion in the UK at the moment. We've got this whole thing. We have to have Cedric Morris iris. Cedric Morris was a painter. And he never did anything fantastic. He just did what he felt like doing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there's some wonderful, hefty, older irises that people have
Mm,
forgotten about. So,
mm,
and
mm,
we have a national collection of irises.
yeah,
So this year I'm going to Chelsea Flower Show exhibit within the plant collections
yes, yes.
category. So that'd be quite interesting to show
Mm,
the continuity of
yeah,
irises.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, in terms of the other perennials you grow, obviously the world of perennials has changed enormously over the
Yeah,
time that we have been in the nursery business.
absolutely.
Um, and so there must be quite, I know it's quite a sort of challenge to sort of to keep up. But also there's a whole lot of older varieties. But how do you uh, get that
Choose.
balance right in terms of,
Yes.
the new and often, quite honestly, new and quite often untested,
Yeah.
and then older favourites which might be getting out of fashion?
Um, I'm a magpie, so I buy things. So
Yeah.
I will tend to find something and think, oh, I'll try that. And if I think it's different, so for instance, I'm looking at, I don't grow many astilbes. They can be a bit coarse with an herbaceous border, but I've just discovered one with dark leaves, and I've tried and glue my name. It's only one I've just bought, and I thought, wow, that's different. So I
Oh,
bought some and just I'll try it. And it looks more like a heuchera leaf with these wonderful. And then I just thought, well, I'll try that one.
mm,
So you try. So as far as I'm concerned, I will add something that is different to my range. So, for instance, catmints, Nepetas, there's loads of them. And there's
mm,
still some of the best are Six Hills Giant, Nepeta Walker's Low, and so on. But some of these are just so amazing. These pictures here. And, and really, I'm just feeling like I have particular favorites. So, for instance, Centuria. For me,
okay. Yeah.
Centurias, whether they're very tall, the
Mm,
macrocephala, which is this one,
yeah.
or they're quite short, like the Montanas and so on. Uh, they will have fit into any border. So, and they grow very well in a moist soil. So anything that will grow well for me, I'm having a go at.
Mm,
I choose those. There are so many to choose from, but it's actually thinking that is a new one, that is different. So that's how I go about selecting my perennials, really. And as I say, being a magpie, you just can't help but. And also,
well,
people ask me, designers
yes.
will ask me for something. I think, well, I've never tried that. I'll try that. But I do like plants where you get flower and foliage. So aruncus is an example.
Ah. Mm,
And the aruncus, there's so many shorter aruncuses now. So you've got things like guinea fowl, aruncus, Horatio, which is taller, but they're very airy, and you have this beautiful
mm, mm.
leaf structure as well. So they give you something all the way from autumn, from spring when they come out of the ground, right the way through to autumn when the leaves start changing. And that is a real advantage, especially for smaller
Yeah.
gardens.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Really important.
Oh, so Centauri, interesting. I mean, there always was Centauri montana and
Yeah.
Macrocephala and a couple of others, but then but it's a huge genus. It's one of those genus. If you look it up in Flora Europaea, that
Yes.
actually starts off by saying, you know, this genus needs attention, but we wish good luck to anybody who takes it on. Uh, there's a lot of good ones. I always found any of the species I tried growing as garden plants flopped something
Yeah,
awful.
yeah.
But how when you've got a genus like that that's not
Well,
terribly,
yes, a
how do
lot
you
of
get on
them
with
I might consider weeds. You know, they are
it?
wildflowers. All perennials are wildflowers, essentially. But if you've got something like Centuria, you really do need to be able to be sure that it's going to give you value, because you can't have everything in your garden. So you have to offer something that's value for money. But there are some that like, I absolutely love, and I don't know, quite difficult to get hold of at the moment. Centuria caramea, and it's like, looks like a wild one that you would find in a verge somewhere or in a meadow or whatever, but it actually flowers for a long time, has a bit more
Ah,
grace to it.
mhm.
So there are all sorts of, and I grow some and I think, oh no, no, forget it. No. And I don't have a great deal of love for something like Solidago goldenrod,
Mm.
because I think it can be a bit invasive and a bit ungraceful. But some of them, I remember seeing one in your garden. I think it was fireworks. I think it was
Yeah,
fireworks,
where goes that? Yeah.
which was lovely, and that
Mm.
really was worth. So I thought, oh, I'll try that one, and that's one I do grow. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's rather very solid oak. It's very unfortunate.
yeah,
These two species, Gigantea and Canadensis, which
mm,
they have not been a particular problem in Britain. But
yeah,
you try driving through Western Poland in late August, and
yeah,
the countryside is just yellow.
yes, yeah,
And they're a problem for Americans as well. But it is a big genus, and the rest of them are perfectly well behaved, and actually, very, very good butterfly plants. I mean, the
yes,
butterflies on my rugosas when I had the garden in Herefordshire were just sensational.
yeah,
But that is a real problem of dealing. You are up against public perception
yes.
very sometimes, aren't you?
Yeah, well, that's right. And look, talking of public perception, something like a peony. So everyone
Mm.
says, "Oh, you can't move a peony." Oh, that is rubbish. You know, we
Oh.
sell thousands a year, and they've got to all be dug out of the ground, and we pop them, and majority of them will flower that year. It just
Mm,
depends on planting them at the right depth,
mm.
which should be no more than 1 inch, whether that in 5 centimeters, whatever, or 2 inches below the surface of the soil for a perennial, herbaceous perennial peony. But tree peony is a bit deeper if it's grafted, but they grow so well and they're so
Mm.
easy to grow. So yes, I will certainly always include something like that, and
Yeah.
you busting the myths about things. But I
Yeah.
learned from other people as well. And I will always ask somebody, well, how does it grow for you? Because everyone has a different experience. I
Mm,
can only
mm,
say
mm,
what grows for me. So,
mm, mm. So, are there genera that you really like, but don't sort of catch on, and you feel they're a bit frustrated?
to me, in the UK, the Hemerocallis daylilies, which
Ah,
are
mhm.
amazing, especially there's such a variety of
Yeah,
shapes
yeah.
and sizes now. And I remember going to a lecture or the introduction of Hemerocallis Stella d'Or. Adrian Bloom launched it back in the 1990s, and he stood there and said, "You can never sell a daylily, but I'm going to try." It's still, if you're in a country where you can only grow so many different types of plants because you have a harsh climate, then you will choose something like a Hemerocallis, which you can grow anywhere. You know, you can't kill it. But I love them because they have spider-shaped flowers. They can grow to 4 feet, or they can be 18 inches, and they can be bushy and full of flowers. So they're very varied. But I've found some of the plants I've been surprised at growing on a heavy clay soil are things like Eryngium, sea holly, which I didn't realise would thrive in our clay, which can be very wet in the winter. So I'm quite fond of those at the moment, especially things like Big Blue, which has enormous, great big spiky flowers on it. And they add that, they push up between the perennials and you get this lovely blue shape. And again, as you talk about bees and butterflies, So that is another reason for growing them, to make sure that there's something in late summer for
Mm.
wildlife. And hemerocallis are amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, Hemerocallis, well, I'm afraid I'm going to be one of those awful people who, I don't know, I love the species,
Yes.
all the hybrids, something about the color, I just find it really difficult to put those colors in with anything else I'm growing. They seem to,
Yes.
they
Yeah.
sort of it's difficult to describe. There's a kind of, it's a range of colors that's actually quite different to a lot of what other stuff that's flying at the same time. But there's a kind of, I don't know, I want to say it's sort of muddy quality to some of
Some of them are, yes, yeah, that's
yeah.
again because there are thousands and thousands of varieties. So
Mm,
I grow on and off quite a few. I've got,
yeah.
and I go, oh, that's amazing. I will stick. So I have to then select the ones that I think that will fit into my perennial border.
Yes, yes,
So you get, especially some of the types. The classic for me is something like, and it's a beautiful dark color, is Ed Murray, Hemerocallis Ed Murray, which has near black, velvety, maroony flower. I mean, they're just so beautiful, and it just comes up in this sort of spray of stars and so on. So they you do have, and then you have the lovely arching foliage. So you
yes.
have to be quite careful what you're choosing again. But like a lot of perennials, I've got a garden, it's an experiment, so it's
Yes.
fit a
Is
bit.
anyone doing any interesting Hemerocallis breeding in Britain?
Um, Not as far as I know. I haven't seen I haven't seen anyone for a while. No, I must admit I haven't seen anyone. There's so many from America,
Yes.
France, the people in France who are breeding. I'm sure they're all over the place, but I'm not up with the modern ones. I have to admit,
Yeah.
or
And I
many.
must say, with the US bred ones, I mean, they have long since run out of sensible names. I mean,
Say that with irises as well. Yes.
yes, yes. I mean, you just get
Yes. Very
the
true.
absurdity of some of the names. Can't help.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So now, yeah, Sanguisorba is one of the genera that seems to have had really quite an amazing coming from nowhere over the last 20 years. It's one of those ones I always associate with Pete Outhoff.
yeah,
And they seem to be continually on a real roll. And of course, they do quite well in damp clay soils, don't
they
they?
do.
So, yeah.
The great problem with them, and I absolutely adore them, is they seed everywhere. So your
Yeah.
original selection has seeded
Yes.
then
Yes.
to then become another lot of collection, and they take over my garden. So I'm
Uh,
trying to wheedle them down to ones that won't seed quite so much. So
mhm.
I always call it Menzies. I'm never quite sure if that's the correct pronunciation. Ones, the shorter ones are probably better. But if you have any of the Sanguisorba officinalis ones, and there's some beautiful ones like Arnhem, which I'm
Yeah.
assuming is a Pete
Yeah.
old dog one, and I have to just make sure it doesn't seed, but you never get it before the seeds fall off because they're
No.
all still flowering. So that's a bit of a problem with them. And I love the Tanner series, Pink Tanner and Tanner itself. They're a bit shorter and they're quite well behaved. They don't seed themselves. So again, you've got this lovely uprightness of a plant and then masses of flower. It doesn't flower for that long. It flowers maybe a couple of months, and this lovely foliage then that goes, and I cut them down so that the
Yeah.
foliage then sits there and is very happy. But there's a lot of self-seeding plants.
Mm.
Astrantias are a classic,
Yes.
apart from Astrantia Roma, that does not seed. But if you have anything that with a major in it, Astrantia major, you'll have them all over the garden, which isn't a
Mm.
bad thing.
Well, at least perhaps not in the southeast of England. I mean, they seem to be quite keen on cooler, moister conditions, don't they?
Yes,
That
definitely.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. I mean, I've certainly seen gardens in Scotland. I mean, it was um, Ian Hamilton Finlay. His sculpture garden was just overrun with Astrantia.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes. Well, you can select out some good ones from it if you're
yes,
independent,
yes.
which is what I do. And then so go, well, that's nice. I'll stick to that one. But yes, yeah. So and it's like another thing is say that the hardy geraniums talking about self-seeding is that be careful if you're ever growing any of the pink ones because the oxonianums they will just seed everywhere. As will I have geranium Rosetta, which is similar sort of to the range of these low range ones that are coming out all the time now, and it just seeds everywhere. So you're never quite sure what the original one was because they pop up. But that's into life as well. So
Yeah.
it's just selecting and digging out what you don't want in the end.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, these things that self-seed, where you've got several cultivars, basically a gene pool, and anything within that gene pool will cross. Traditional horticulture has really emphasized cultivars, and a cultivar is everything is genetically identical. They're all essentially clones of the parent plant. Do you think, in fact, with some plants that is actually unrealistic? That we should perhaps be talking about, like we do perhaps with annuals, like a seed strain rather than.
Well, this is actually a discussion in amongst the RHS anyway, and giving things AGMs, the Water Garden Merit, to basically something that actually should be just like Astrantia major should not get an Water Garden Merit because it will seed everywhere and it's so variable. And you can't actually say you're growing that plant, it'll be a strain of something else. And that can be a difficulty. When you're buying a plant, and this is what I find, I will buy in bare root or I'll buy in pot something like Astrantia major and it flowers and I think, but it's pink. It shouldn't be that pink, it's a muddy colour, pink and green. It should be quite a clear, not pure white, but it should be quite a clear white. So there's a lot of in the trade when you're trying to buy a plant, it's actually not what I would consider the correct plant that I know of, because it's just seeded and people just dig them up. That's it. Yeah, it is a problem.
The whole trend towards naturalistic or ecological planting design, I mean, what sort of impact is that making on your business? Not just in terms of the sort of plants you're growing, but also the kind of quantities you're.
But it's a funny thing. I think you were at this. It was a symposium held at Kew. Was it in the 90s?
Oh, because there's that the one 1994 with Brita van Schoner.
Yes, and I went to that.
That was one of those.
That was the launch, wasn't it?
That was a real watershed moment. And Brita van Schoner, who we must get on here again. One of those names that's been on the list forever. We must get her on because she's got this wonderful sense of humour,
well, that's why I remember
getting up and making this joke about faulty towers and don't mention the war, and it was so funny. That conference was everything kind of goes back to that, doesn't it?
It was an amazing conference actually. But I remember coming out of it thinking, but it's never going to work in the UK. A, unless you have poor soil, and B, unless you have acres. Which is effectively still very much the same thing. We have it has adapted to our much softer growing climate a little bit more now, and while it works absolutely beautiful on grand scales, it can be difficult for a smaller garden, and with many people only having a garden that's quite small. Grasses are a real problem, so I don't sell a lot of grasses. I try and sell ones that won't seed around. So we do sell a lot of certain grasses, so a lot of little steeper, tenuous foliar, etc., tenuissima, and because you can place them within a small area. But we don't sell a vast amount, and I think that's for your specialist grower. So the naturalistic, which tends to be grass based, is not necessarily something that we tend to sell a lot of. And it's amazing how much, say for instance, Japanese anemones, which are quite, once they get going, a really vigorous plant, but they're still one of the most popular, which always astounds me. I think, well, okay, people want them. And
I think they're one. Their one drawback, of course, is they are slow to establish. But once you've got them going, it's very good quality foliage, and something that has that foliage that fills up to the front of the border, and then they flower is. And personally, I think Honorine Jobert is just utterly impossible to beat. But they flower for such a long time.
Absolutely,
flower in the edge of shade. So I think there's very good reasons for.
Yes. And that's why it is still a very popular plant. I mean, some of the plants I really like are asters. I love asters,
Mm.
and of course, over the last 40 odd years, when I started selling plants, most of the asters were the ballard types. They're the
Yes,
great big,
yes.
and I'm sorry, I cannot go for the modern name. I know I can't even say it anymore. It's
I can never
simplified.
spell it. I mean, when botanists change names for very good reasons, they should always employ a horticultural consultant.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Have it as a
I still
sim.
can't spell Symphyria trichum.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you,
it's just
Annie? Can you spell Symphyria trichum? Go on, put it in the chat now. See if you can.
Yes, I can spell it. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
go then.
well, even the National Collection holder
You can't spell it.
down in Malvern, they call them asters as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
everyone knows what an aster. Anyway,
Yeah,
so when they started selling, they were the big Novae Belgii types, which always got mildew. But then there's been a trend, and this is the help really of the naturalistic planting, of including things, the smaller flowered ones, and there are some magnificent ones around. So you have things like Aster Vasta Level and Glow in the Dark, which have lovely dark foliage, and they just bounce out of the soil with this wonderful foliage, and then you get the sprays of little flowers throughout autumn, and I think that's where there's been a
yeah,
real benefit. Are
yes,
very healthy. They don't get mildew. They are amazing.
yeah,
So yeah, I think there's been a lovely shifting to going back to more natural style of planting rather
yes.
than things
But,
that look
yeah, and
like
Asper's
artificial.
a really nice example. I mean,
Yeah,
certainly the Picton business has done very nicely out of that and
yeah,
handled that shift very well.
yeah.
And of course, North America is just full of Aster species. But I think, talking to Helen Picton, it sounds like there's a definite kind of, they've hit a block. They're trying certain American species that simply don't do in the British climate.
And which was the ones
Yeah,
she?
certainly, as Azurius was one.
Yeah,
They some of the sort of, I suppose, perhaps maybe shortgrass prairie, dry prairie species have been less successful. So I suppose, yeah, some good new hybrids coming out of Germany and Holland. I mean, in terms of finding new plants, where do you go? I mean, do you make trips over to Holland, or do you search other nurseries lists, or?
well, to be honest, I can actually walk into a garden centre where they have, because the great problem you have with plants is if it's got a plant breeder's right, and like there are thousands of heucheras around, is choosing one that actually is, they do actually do grow very well for me. They used to be something I would never grow a heuchera, but actually, if I go into a garden centre, I think, oh, actually, that looks really nice. I'll try one and see if it's any different to any of the others. But yes, and I do go through suppliers list, and of course Holland is ideal, and there are one or two amazing wholesalers where you can try something that's a little bit different. I do actually have quite a few perennials that they've cropped up in the garden, so I'm bulking some of my own up. But there was a period back in 1990s again when China was selling a lot of tree peonies. So I've got something like 30 varieties of tree peonies. And talking about when you say something that won't grow, Chinese tree peonies do not do in our climate. So don't ever buy a tree peony that has a Chinese name. They just don't flower because we're not dry enough, cold enough in the winter, and hot enough in the summer. So if you're looking for something like a woody peony, as they should rightly be called, then always, and they're very expensive and quite difficult to get hold of, but always choose ones that have an English type name or a Japanese name, because they will flower for you. And that is the difficulty of learning. So I buy in. So for instance, the tree peonies, there are a couple of really good propagators in Holland. I don't buy many, they only have 3 on offer. So I'll offer 2 and keep one. So I get a bit like that, but I'll try that one. Pulmonarias and lungworts, that's another group that I actually really like. And begonias, which people have a love-hate on. So I collect them again, and if I see one, they bulk up quickly, so I can buy one plant and think, okay, then I'll split it up and sell it. So that's where I just, anywhere really, I sort of flick through the internet and go, oh, I'll try that one. got it in the garden and bulk it up. So yeah.
I mean, pulmonaria is a case in point in that there are older varieties that sit around for ages, and then some breeder gets hold of them. And in the case of pulmonaria, a certain breeder who shall remain nameless in Portland, Oregon, and then he has a run, and he churns out a whole lot of new varieties, a lot of which are actually not really improvements on the old ones. I mean, do you do much trialing, or do you?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's my thing, is that buying in as many. When I have this passion, so I had a passion for sanguisaurus, and I had passion for a full pulmonary. So I sort of buy one or two of each and grow them around the place and decide if it was any different, and also whether it will continue to grow, because a lot of them are micropropagated and they don't always grow so well in the soil. The longevity is shortened. And that is a big problem. Begonias are great because I can put one in and just leave it a couple of years. There are some lovely Eric Smith begonias which you can't buy very easily, and they have fabulous foliage, and they have most beautiful massive flowers. So they're ones sitting in the garden, and we've cut them all up and propagated them out, and those hopefully we'll be able to offer later. But they have to, when they're sold, they're sold. I can't restock for it. So yeah, that's one of the big things on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think begonias are an amazing genus in terms of their resilience to environmental extremes.
Yeah.
Plants that are found on Siberian mountaintops, but which also flourish and survive in Mediterranean summer climates.
Yes, yeah, well, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of plants for climate change, begonia have got a lot of potential.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and you could grow it anywhere. I mean, there are a lot of plants that, because I've been on 3 different sites, so I've grown on pure sand right the way to where we are now, which is a soggy, horrible sort of clay type, but it's actually a clay loam, so it actually is very rich. And I find certain plants will have grown in everything. Begonias, a case in point, and things like the centurias. Something like geums, which is in the picture now. The geums are a bit hit and miss for me, and I have a passion for them. So the little short ones are the spring flowering, which are absolutely invaluable, dry out quite quickly. So you have to be quite careful of those, and then they will seed again. So you have to make sure, select ones which are good. So, and this is another thing. There are so many of them coming out again. You're thinking,
yes,
should I even bother to try that one? Because I've already got one that looks like that. Yes,
I've noticed that, and certainly that the geum explosion has been over the past few years has been amazing. Do you think that some of them actually have a potential as ground cover, because you've got that really dense, tight, low foliage with some of them?
Yeah, they're really good for ground cover, except in my soil here, they tend to die out in the middle. So they will creep out. Yes. And so you really do have to do the old-fashioned thing, which you dig them up every 3 years, or just lose them and divide it, put it back down in the ground. Because if you don't, they will fade. And that is a big problem with a lot of perennials. They can fade and disappear. So you have to sort of think, once they start looking a bit like, better dig it up. Iris is a case in point, of course.
Yes. We're talking about fading and disappearing.
Yeah.
One of the things I really got into quite a few years ago was really trying to research those perennials that are actually short-lived. And by short-lived, I mean actually genetically programmed to be short-lived. That essentially often kind of non-clonal or reduced ability to spread. And I've sort of banged on about this quite a lot over the years. And I think we really ought to have this category of short-lived perennials. But I mean, in terms of running a nursery and selling plants, how do you deal with that with customers?
Well, I actually do say to people they're short-lived. I actually, on our website, in the description, I say this is a short-lived perennial. And I can remember one plant that you discussed at one point and said it was too short-lived, was Astrofricatii monk, which in my garden, after 7 years, is still coming up and flowering. So I'm waiting for it to fade, like you said it would, but it's there.
But no, I did very well with it as well when I was on old red sandstone, and there was, it came up in that survey of my mostly hardy plant society respondents. That was one of the results that I was actually not so sure about. I could never really explain that. Whereas there was a good scientific explanation for the fate of pretty well everything else.
Well, things that are obviously short-lived and can be a bit tender are things Verbena bonariensis.
Oh, yes, yes.
Certainly 40.
Glorified annual.
Absolutely. Well, and having said that, 40 odd years ago, you would never grow it up in Shropshire or in the Midlands
No,
because
no.
it was too cold. Now I can actually get it seed around and grow again. It is,
Yeah.
but it's a self-seeder. And that is the delight of it. Another lovely one which has recently hit the ground running is Verbena Bampton, which is, and it seeds itself. And it's beautiful because you have this wonderful brown dark foliage and these little pops of purple that come out. And it's a lovely plant. But how long lived each plant is? Well, it seems to be I'm on 4 years on one plant. So I'm thinking, must be
That's
all
good.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Just never quite sure.
Mm.
I'm observing them.
Yes, yes. So if you had somebody comes along, they've got a heavy clay soil like yours, which genera would you really emphasize?
Well, going through the ones hardy geraniums.
Yes.
They'll go anyway. I mean, the wonderful thing about hardy geraniums is you've got something will flower right the way from April, and you can still have lots of flower on them in with the now the modern day classic is geranium roseanne, which will still be flowering in October. So you've got not only you have ground cover plants that can be 6 inches high or right the way up, tall plants and so on. Geranium silostine, which is a monster and again a self-seeder, but that is they are very good. So it's definitely hardy geraniums. In spring, I would have, as I've got pulmonarias and begonias and geums and centaurea. Then you go through the next set of seasons. You've got sort of getting to June, July, August. Well, I mean, now you've got an open door. I do very well with heleniums, surprisingly, just considering their background. They grow very well in my soil, which I'm amazed at. And I said the geums, which I was proud. Galenia. Oh, gotta have Galenia. Trifoliata, which is such a beautiful plant and very long lived. I've also found Amsonia grows beautifully in my garden and is very long lived, and is Baptisia. So that this I can reel them off. And
There's plenty to go with, isn't there? Yeah,
yes, and they're long lived as well, and you don't need to move them, and they have lovely foliage, and they look great in spring when they come out of the ground all the way through. So, and the runcus are very good. So I'm thinking about any other ones. So I've gone, and asters. Asters do very well. The things that don't do well really I'm getting onto the soft, although I have found spaces for the softer side of things. So stachys do very well, actually. I know people don't like Stachys byzantina, but I think it's an amazing plant. The bees love it. It's ground cover. And it will seed around, so you get these again. You sort of these little islands of silver around your borders. That does well. I'm just trying to think ones that don't do very well. I get very disappointed with. Pimpinella is a bit of a fashion plant at the moment. These umbels of pink, and it doesn't do well with us at all.
No.
I'll do that.
Now, possibly a sensitive question, but do you grow any roses?
I actually didn't grow any at all because I got not enough space, but my father insisted I had some. So they're still at the bottom of the garden, and I really do have to cull some of them because they just don't fit in with my style. But I do, there's one or two I actually love, but I sort of go, yeah, okay, I've got them.
Yeah, you're perhaps not the best person to ask about integrating perennials with roses.
Yes, no, I can tell you what to grow under them. I mean, again, I've given you the classics for growing underneath would be hardy geraniums. And
yes.
Anything that will sort of add foliage, because I do love foliage, and then because plants don't flower all the time. No perennial flowers all the time. So blending different styles of foliage, do that first, then add your colour. Choose your colour of flower, but look at the foliage most importantly. And then you will have a tapestry that comes up through the season. And that is something I really, really love, is that whole tapestry. Like euphorbias are a classic. Where you've got this amazing green in spring, and then it fades a little bit, and then it has something.
Mm.
But it's basically a foliage plant. So
Yeah.
yes, so anything with foliage and roses can have quite hard foliage.
Are there any genera out there that you think are really undiscovered? You're kind of waiting for somebody to do some work on them and popularize them in the way that perhaps 20 years ago somebody might look at Veronicastrum or Baptisia and Sanguisaur and say, well, I wish somebody would actually promote these a bit.
Well, and it's an odd one. It's a very old-fashioned plant. Was a Tanacetum. She used to be pyrethrum.
Yeah, but
And use
yes, but they're practically commercially extinct now, aren't
exactly, and they were absolutely wonderful plants.
Yeah.
And I have one in the garden, Tanacetum Isla Gold. Is it Isla Gold? And it has. I like yellow. A lot of people don't like yellow, but I do love yellow. Yellow and purple. It's just lovely, and it has lovely yellow foliage. The flowers are not, but it's a very good doer. And I get very annoyed that people don't see the glory of this plant.
Yes.
I just wish somebody would say, I mean, I really ought to have a go and sort of put a couple of them together and see if we can get something genetically fantastic about it. But yeah, there's that one. And what else do I really walk past and I go, oh, that's so lovely, but there's nothing else. I can't think at the moment. I'm sure there's something of pop. Veronicastrums I love. They grow very well, but we're really stuck in a small bracket of colours of white, purple, and pink.
Yes.
And the foliage is, the flowers do occasionally go out, but it'd quite nice to have some shorter ones. I know there's Veronica, but they grow differently because I love the way the leaves of Veronicastrum grow. In sort of a scaffolding, I call it, up the stem.
Yes.
So I think
I'm sure it's only a matter of time before some American nursery comes up with a compact range of Veronicastrum.
Anything will grow in a garden centre, because that's the whole thing. Have something you can put in a garden centre, won't fall over, and will flower for a long time. That's the whole point. Yeah.
On the subject of garden centres, I mean, how do you sell most of your plants? Is it in containers at the nursery or mail order?
They're all no mail order. We're down a very small lane. There's no way you can get to us, which is great. We open a couple of times a year, although I'm going to dig up four of my main borders this year, so I'm not open to the National Garden. I'll do a pop-up when the border is established, so it's entirely mail order. 7 to 8.
How in terms of proportion, how much of that is bare root as opposed to containerized?
Well, we're trying to increase the bare root, and obviously that's how we all used to buy them. But most people really buy plants now in the spring, where it's shifted over the last 40 odd years that I've been in it from. It was always autumn was the most important time, but now as garden centres have grown, people tend to think, oh, I'll buy now. So now is spring. From now onwards to June is our main selling season. But we sell all year round. I tend to specialise in smaller pots and get more onto the nursery. Big pots, can't get many on them. So we tend to do 9 centimetre pots.
Yes.
They grow very well. And put everything into Melcork compost. And I've never had a problem with peat-free compost, and I've used it for 20 years. And there seems to be a bit of reluctance against it, but I don't see. Perennials aren't naturally peat-loving plants, so I don't know why people put them in peat. So it's always been use a compost, good compost.
So, Annie,
well, we've got some we've got some questions.
I can't, for some reason, I can't stop screen sharing.
Oh, right. Well, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we can carry on with the questions. There is Laura's asked for lots of plants for clay soil, but we've actually covered that, which is fantastic. And they're saying, would any of these self-seeders work in a wilder meadow? So I'm not sure if that's still in a clay situation, but Claire, can you is there anything that wilder self-seeders that you think?
Some things, yes, they sort of pop up, which is really annoying, really. And you sort of find that, I mean, I've actually found stachys will actually seed into grass. It's just doesn't mind it at all. What else have I found popping up through the lawns? I think, oh, I wish it wasn't there. Don't ever grow a ranunculus. I'll tell you one plant that talking. It's actually a wildflower. It's Pilosella. You've probably begins with AU. I'm terrible with my dyslexia gets it, but it's commonly called fox and cubs, and it's an orange,
little orange, yeah.
And it's an absolute nightmare in our soil, but that pops up everywhere as well. And that's self-seed and go. But actually, it's the star of the show when I've opened my a garden in June. People just absolutely love it. I just go, don't. But
it's such an intense orange colour, isn't it?
It's fabulous, actually. It's fabulous. But then if you put it in the border, it just creeps over everything. I've got to dig up my borders.
Stephen's asking, any sanguisorbas which don't fall over?
None of them actually fall over for me. I'm wearing them, but then I've got big hedges around this bit. Sanguis are the shorter ones. So Sanguisorba pink tanner, that will grow to about 30 odd, 96.
And then one of Cohn Janssen's, which he named Stand-Up Comedian.
Yes.
The lovely white one of pendulous white flowers. So that stands well.
Yeah.
Yes, I haven't noticed that fall over. It is one I do have. Yes.
Actually, we had Cohn Janssen in Grunberg at the weekend talking. And he's fantastic.
He's good.
He's absolutely fantastic.
Another one we must get on. Yes,
exactly. And then Rachel's asking, out of interest, which currently are the most popular perennials you're selling, and has that changed in recent years?
Something we touched on at the beginning. Still, one of the most popular perennials is anemone orange bear, and it's always been popular. It's never
quite rightly so.
Absolutely never drifted out of it. The next most popular probably is Salvia caradonna. Now, I have great problems with salvias. I absolutely adore them, but I can't grow the Nemorosa and the Sylvestris types. They just don't like in clay. They just disappear.
No, well, they're almost semi-desert plant. They're steppe plant.
Yeah, exactly. But the Verticillata, so for something like Purple Rain, will grow really well for me and will self-seed and comes out really nicely. And I can grow. So they are very popular. Nepetas. They're very classic. They're still really popular. But they're such good doers. They'll grow in clay soil. They'll grow in sand soil. So they are also very good.
Claire, do you ever, with things like the salvias, would you think about growing them in slight raised beds if there's things that you really, really, really want, but they won't be happy in your clay? Do you ever do that or not?
Well, it's funny enough. We're trying that a little bit more. I mean, I do, for instance, I do have raised beds which are initially for vegetables, but they've been, slowly colonized by other things.
Populated,
So for my irises, I love. There's a collection of iris called arrel bread irises. They're desert dwellers, but I can grow them in a raised bed, which is filled actually with spent peat-free or sustainable compost. And they grow beautifully. They'll do really well.
There was a flower in the rolling screen, and it was the flower. It was the slide before the achillea, and it was a white, very almost like a sort of open lax allium, sort of off-white colour. Rachel's saying, "What's this mystery plant?" She's desperate to know. So it sort of looked like a rather open and lax sort of.
That's the clematis? Is it?
Is it? It may be
herbaceous clematis.
Which one is it? It is rather. Oh, right.
It's amazing. Now that is one plant that I wish would be more popular.
Sorry, what was it again, Claire?
Herbaceous clematis are just so lovely because
we don't know which one.
It's the one with a lot of massive little white flowers. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Yes. It's just so stunning, and because you've got the purple foliage, that will come up, and I mean it can be a bit sort of fally over.
Yeah, yeah.
Clematis recta.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
it's actually rather nice if it's sort of
That's
even
perfect.
scrambling through.
Absolutely.
And then the whole thing about not being able, this is a question for me, not being able to move peonies. Well, who started that then? If peonies are happy to be moved, where did that come from?
It goes back decades. In the old
Mm.
peony books, they have even sort of mentioned it. And I thought,
Yeah.
probably a peony book for every decade. And I don't know whether it's because they cost so much at the beginning. I really
Right.
don't know.
Yeah.
And I have no idea. And it was also, there was always a thing about you've got to plant peonies before December. Now, there is some truth in that if you want to have good growth, that it is better to plant. They have 2 seasons of growing, the root growing. So they'll grow after flowering. So they'll produce roots from June, briefly then, and they will produce roots again in the autumn as it gets damper. But you can plant as long as the eyes, the leaf hasn't grown too tall. You can plant them right the way through to mid-February, March.
Right.
So I don't know whether that was the problem with them.
Right. And then going back to Hemerocallis, I agree with you completely, because one of the reasons I think they're so wonderful is that they're probably the earliest foliage to emerge. You know,
some are evergreen, semi-evergreen.
Yeah, and you know, when it's the bleakest kind of, you know, horrible winter months, and you see them coming up through the soil, you think, oh, thank God, you know.
Yes,
Absolutely. And Noel, if you obviously haven't tried Gentle Shepherd or Catherine Woodbury, if you're struggling, I mean, there are some lovely softer colours. I use Gentle Shepherd a lot because it's so it's almost like a sort of ivory white. It's gorgeous.
And Joe Senior is a similar one as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Noel's just not turned a page in his Hemerocallis catalogue.
And these are old varieties now. They're considered historic.
Yeah. But they are, like you say, they're reliable, they're good. And I think also going to the anemone, you know, the fact is that they are reliably good in late summer and autumn, and they're trouble free. And yes, they can get a little bit sort of spready, but not too bad. I think they just work so hard in a garden, don't they? You can't
absolutely.
beat. Yeah.
I've got one in the garden when I moved here, and I inherited from my mother. Must have planted it. I must have given her. I don't know what it is, but it starts flowering in July.
Yeah.
And it's about 150 centimeters high, and it's in a little shady spot where it doesn't get much sun. But it starts flowering in July, and it will flower on and off right the way through till August, and then you get these lovely cotton wool buds.
That's right. Yes, they're lovely, aren't they? Yes.
And so you've got this wonderful structure on the leaf and on the stem as well. So
yes. No, they're fantastic. They really are fantastic. I think that's all of our questions. I think we've got lots of nice comments saying how wonderful, what a great conversation and everything. But
how useful it is for finding out stuff going on clay. So no, we've had a great
and at this time of year, perfect timing, someone's saying, because, you know, planning the garden and thinking about this, you know, what's happening for this spring and summer. So.
And before we wrap up,
Claire's website, somebody's asking for.
Oh yes, Claire's website. Well, that'll be on the YouTube. What is the website, Claire? If we can,
well, actually, if you just put in a search engine, Claire Ross,
hardy plants, you get there pretty quickly. Yes,
hardy plants. So, it'll get there.
I'd also just like to flag up my perennialdirectory.org, which I launched a couple of months ago, which is a go-to online source for information, particularly about long-term plant performance. At some point, Claire, I'd love to sit down and go through that with you, actually.
Yes, I know. It'd be quite interesting, actually, to compare notes, especially if you're growing on different types of soil.
Great, it's been brilliant having you.
Absolutely.
Great about plants, and I think a lot of people will learn a lot from this. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And you must be exhausted having just arrived back from holiday. But thank you so much for plugging this in on your arrival. Yeah, lovely.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.